Can exercise help with hair growth? Exercise has so many beneficial effects on multiple systems. You can almost randomly pick and or system, and exercise is going to be beneficial for that. On the other hand, it's funny how that guy wanted to take a right turn right in front of me. This is one of the things that you guys, when you decide to bike, you really have to pay attention, especially at traffic lights. Just like I was sitting there, you know, I was the first to come there. He came from behind. He was big, and yet he wanted to go first and take a turn and cut me off. And if I didn't pay attention and saw that he was signaling to go right, I could have certainly got myself into trouble. And this is one of the risks of biking. And you, again, if you decide to do this, be super careful at these turns. I have a friend who some years ago was hurt pretty badly in exactly this situation, where somebody decided to take a turn and run them over because they didn't see them, or I don't know, they were too distracted. Anyways, can exercise help with hair growth? This is a question that comes fairly often, not just about exercise, but how can I get my hair to grow better, to look better? And because exercise is so helpful for so many organs and systems, you can almost pick and choose whichever you want, and you'll know that it's going to be beneficial, and you'll find evidence for that. It's only natural to imagine that exercise can benefit hair growth. And indeed, that is the case. There aren't that many studies in the literature looking specifically at this issue, so I can't quote you a whole lot of data. But intuitively, and based on what we know exercise does in general, we can draw some informed and most likely valid conclusions. And here's how I would do that. First of all, we know that exercise helps with blood flow. By the way, here's another situation where people oftentimes miss bikers. They just don't see you. So you kind of have to watch for those guys coming out from places. So for one thing, exercise increases blood flow, which means more blood coming to the hair follicles. And we know that increased blood flow there stimulates hair growth. Not only that, but with blood comes oxygen, and oxygen is helpful, and so are the nutrients that the blood carries. So as long as you don't exhaust yourself with ultra, marathons or exercise to exhaustion every time you go out and do something, you should be having sufficient, and of course, assuming you have a varied, balanced diet, you should have good, useful nutrients coming to those hair follicles with the increased blood flow that exercise generates. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it, though, that could go against, an argument against at least certain types of exercise and their impact on hair growth, is, as we discussed in a recent video, more intense, at least moderate, and especially more intense exercise, especially the weightlifting, intense bouts of high intensity training, those can trigger an increase in testosterone. And we know that this hormone that is present both in men and women, when you increase the amount of testosterone, usually you can expect some hair loss. So the question is, would engaging in such forms of more intense exercise cause hair loss? And the answer to that is actually not. We don't have evidence that that's happening. For one thing, as I mentioned in the testosterone increase with exercise video, the increase happens for, about half an hour. During and maybe for half an hour or so after that bout of exercise. It doesn't stay elevated forever. So short pulses of increase in testosterone like that, they do not have systemic effects to where they make your hair fall. However, in the bodybuilding community, especially among young people, there is this perception that more testosterone is better and there's nothing to worry about. Well, you will see among that population over time significant hair loss. You see these bald guys with big muscles that look unnatural on them. You can bet that there has been steroid use in their history, and significant amounts, not just slightly higher than physiologic amounts. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other part of this equation, of course, has to do with what is typically behind hair loss in the general population. And a lot of it has to do with genetic factors, but some of it is modifiable. And stress, especially chronic stress or periods of intense stress, can lead to hair loss. It's not unusual, for example, during a difficult pregnancy or delivery to see hair loss. Major life stressors like that, you can see hair loss. And here in this category, I will also include those extreme forms of exercise, marathon runners, people who do these extreme races, like I believe her name is Jamie Paris or something like that, who ran for 60 hours more or less straight. These things, while they make news and you can appreciate the resilience and the effort and the achievement, they are not good for you. I don't mix my words in here. When I have people coming to me and say, hey, I've run 10 marathons. Sure, it's a feat. I don't want to minimize that. But it's not what your body needs. Why do that? Why run for 60 hours straight? Just because you want to see how long it takes before you totally collapse and something bad may happen to you? I have an issue with that. Anyways, that's my bias when it comes to this. But coming back to the topic of hair growth or hair loss and exercise, these extreme forms of exercise represent a significant stress, not just the event itself when you run for 60 hours, but the training for that. To be able to do that, you have to train very intensely. And a lot of times these people don't pay enough attention to get all the nutrition that they need for that. So where do you figure the body is going to take or cut off from non-essential stuff? Hair growth in that context can be sacrificed by the body. So again, on the positive side, if you engage in cardio type of exercise, aerobic training, it will diminish the stress. We talked about the impact on anxiety, on depression, on chronic stress, on decrease in the stress hormones. And that in turn, indirectly, can actually have a positive, beneficial effect on hair growth. So you see, there's a dynamic here, and there's a lot involved in this, hormonal balances, and what type of exercise you do, and for how long, and how crazy you go about it, right? So balance is very important in this, like everything else in life.